And how does the Hillsborough River, how does this play into the general overall ecosystems of the bay and the Gulf?
Well, the Hillsborough River is one of the 3 rivers that feeds Tampa Bay. From the east here, from Hillsborough County, you've got the Hillsborough, the Alphi, and the Little Manatee. The Hillsborough River is a tidal river. It flows into a salty body of water, so it gradually gets saltier. It's an estuary. It's where life begins. Without the nursery function of the Hillsborough River, you don't have fish in the bay and out in the Gulf, because different types of fish need different types of salinity levels in order to reproduce. Some fish like fresh water, some fish like slightly salty water and somewhat saltier water and so forth. If you don't have the variety of habitats in that body of water, then you don't have the full variety of fish that naturally should be here. Okay. That's what happened with the Hillsborough River because of the lack of flow of water down the river. You know, Hillsborough River has a dam about a mile from Busch Gardens at Rolette Park. That's where the city of Tampa gets its drinking water supply from. Of course, we use half of that water for watering our lawns, but yes, it's the drinking water. And that dam was built for that purpose at the end of World War II, and at that time, Tampa city fathers looked at it and said, we will never run out of water. We have an infinite, unlimited supply of water. And at that point, they couldn't imagine how much Tampa would grow, but it did. And by the time we got into the early 70s, we had the first days when there wasn't water flowing over that dam every day. And it got so bad that we got up into the point where there were only a few weeks a year when there was water flowing. So most of the year, there was not, you didn't have the type of conditions that are necessary for fish to reproduce and thrive. And the Tampa Bay Estuary Program convened scientists back in the mid-90s from the area and looked at that and said, yes, you have to have a minimal flow of water every day. That provides oxygen that the fish need, and it also provides the continual salinity gradient, the different types of salinity levels to provide the different types of habitats. But no one did anything about it. The city didn't want to give the river any of the water from its reservoir, so what do? The state law says you cannot do significant harm to a river or a lake by cutting off the flow of water. But that's the kind of law that isn't enforced unless people ask that it be enforced. So when the Southwest Florida Water Management District passed a rule in 2000 that said the only water that the river would get would be some of Sulphur Springs water that flows into the river 2 miles below the dam, that would be rerouted to the dam. A lot of us in the community said, well, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you're not giving the river any of its own fresh water that it isn't already getting. That's wrong. You can't amputate a river. So we formed a group that we called Friends of the River. And we formed it when the Environmental Protection Commission said, you know what? We can't fight this. They had told us up to the very last minute that they were going to fight this and fight this rule and appeal this rule. And I said, great, we'll help you. But then they said at the very last minute, we can't. And I've always believed that the reason is that Mayor Greco was going to introduce legislation that would have eliminated the EPC, which could be done by the state legislature. So I think they are having a gun held to their head. That's political reality. That's what really happened. So we formed Friends of the River. We incorporated, one of our friends is an attorney, and filed an appeal within 48 hours of the EPC telling us that they couldn't do it. Then we started educating people in the community, a lot of people who live on the river and around the river and throughout the city, about the fact that the river doesn't get any flow. Now, most people look at the river and they say, what's the problem? There's plenty of water in it. It's just the bay rising and falling with the tides. Yeah. It's just as salty up at the dam as it is right here in downtown Tampa at the University of Tampa. Yeah. So we had to tell people, actually, we're at risk right now of this river being killed, this river never having a chance to be restored, because we've gone through a third of a century without having the conditions that are really necessary for life. And people wonder, what's happened to the fish? Why, you know, the fishing used to be great here. There used to be a lot of birds. What's happened? The river's got problems. We appealed, we organized, we got hundreds and hundreds of people to write the mayor, write Swift Mud, And we also organized Earth Day and had a huge flotilla 2 days before our hearing with Swiftmud in April 2001. When we sat down with those folks, they said, you know what, you're right, we don't know enough about this river. Let's study it for 5 years. Great. They studied it for 5 years, all the different agencies, scientific agencies, and we have a huge amount of scientific data on our Hillsborough River now. And what that told us was that we were right. The river does need a little bit of water every day, a little bit of fresh water every day is really what it needs to function. It identified 4 different habitats zones. We and EPC had to compromise for now. We got 3 of those zones, 3 of the 4. It's not fresh, but it's close to being fresh. And we have a lot more oxygen. Is it enough? The study is ongoing, but as of the 1st of 2008, there was a minimal flow of water restored. So every day in the last year and a half, there has been a minimal amount of fresh water flowing down the Hillsborough River. Some of it is from Sulphur Springs, and that water is almost fresh, 1.3 parts per thousand salinity, not quite fresh. And then there's water that Tampa Bay water has stored in the bypass canal that is introduced into the river on the south end of Temple Terrace, and then the city releases 3/4 of that water, assuming that a quarter of it probably evaporates.